When I was in school, specifically high school, the only sex ed that we received were like 2 gym periods throughout the entire school year. The gym teacher sat us down and talked about various STDs that we could receive from unprotected intercourse. And since this was in NYC, one of the more socially progressive areas in this country, or so people like to think, and not some Bible Belt rural area, it wasn't 100% abstinence-only education. There were mentions of condoms and birth control, and there were condoms being provided to students in the locker room area. However, it still took a back seat to hammering in abstinence. Abstinence is the only way you could 100% ensure that you don't get an STD or an unwanted pregnancy. And my problem with this, first and foremost, is you can make sex seem as spooky as you want to teens. There are still a lot of teens out there who are still going to have it. Now, my teen years were boring and sexless. Oh well. But I did know some people in high school who were having sex. Now, I never asked them, hey, how's your sex life going? But they made it pretty obvious that they were getting laid. They would brag about it. We were all horn dog teenage guys who always had sex at the top of our minds. How typical. Now, is having sex at high school age too young? Maybe, but at the end of the day, I really don't care. It is ultimately none of my business, and who the fuck am I to cast judgment and police what others can and can't do? Especially when it comes to something that so many people at that point in life engage in regardless. The only thing that I care about is people not being stupid and using protection. That is why I think everyone should have easy access to contraception. No matter how much you try to shun and stigmatize sex, these students are still going to try to find ways to have it. There's a reason why your teen years are often considered your most rebellious. Instead of fighting a losing battle, teach them about the potential consequences of unprotected sex and teach them about the avenues they can take that would help prevent these potential risks should they choose to have sex regardless. Abstinence-only education does nothing to prepare one for when they do decide to begin having sex. All it accomplishes is stigmatizing an act that most of this world's population likes engaging in. There wouldn't be 8 billion of us if sex was this completely unpleasurable act that most people didn't like partaking in. I wish sex wasn't this forbidden subject that people felt uncomfortable talking about. It is the act that brought all of us into existence. Now, if you're telling me every little graphic and intimate detail about the sex you just had last night without me asking, and trust me, I wouldn't ask you in the first place, yeah, that is none of my business. But teaching young people about what sex is and what contraception is, and teaching them how to engage in the act responsibly, is not grooming them or isn't anything perverse. It is simply teaching them to not be fucking stupid. Why do you think these Bible Belt rural areas where abstinence-only education is the predominant form of sex ed are plagued the most with teen pregnancy? Because the only form of quote-unquote sex ed that the teens in these areas receive is that sex before marriage is naughty naughty, they better not engage in it, and receive no further education on how to safely have sex should they choose to have it. Which, considering these are teenagers we're talking about, they probably fucking will, because at this point in their lives is when their hormones are most out of whack. They'll find anything to fuck, given the opportunity. Source, I was a teenager not that long ago. The real position that is harmful to the youth is sheltering them. Sex ed isn't just limited to teaching teenagers about contraception. When I was in elementary school, we would have assemblies every once in a while where the adults would talk to us about inappropriate sexual behavior. Like, for example, if someone tried to touch us in our groin area, we would have to tell a trusted adult about this inappropriate behavior immediately, because it is absolutely not behavior that someone should be engaging in with a child. We were also taught that there may be an instance where someone who we think is a trusted adult figure may try to engage in these acts with us, and try to justify their inappropriate behavior by them being a trusted authority figure in our lives. Obviously, they were essentially teaching us about grooming and what kind of touch is inappropriate for a child to experience and how to identify these red flags. And this is often what sex ed is for children. It's not teaching 5-year-olds blowjobs and 69. It is teaching them to keep themselves safe and to identify behavior that is off limits for someone their age to be on the receiving end of. If you don't like the idea of a child being taught these things, I say too bad. There is no shortage of horrendous people out there who would have no problem doing horrible things to your child should they have the opportunity. And I think it is imperative for a child to be be able to identify inappropriate behavior so they can go and tell an adult immediately. And even if your child doesn't experience these things, what if when they're a teenager they get someone pregnant, or they themselves get pregnant? Your abstinence-only education is not going to save you at that point, and it most certainly did not equip your child with the knowledge of proper precautions they should have taken before having sex. Maligning sex ed as child grooming, quote-unquote, is fucking preposterous because it teaches children and teens alike to keep themselves safe, which is something you are failing at doing. And not to mention the homophobic undertones of abstinence-only education. The only instance where sex is appropriate is when it's during marriage, and of course that marriage will be between a man and a woman, and they will only be having sex because they plan on making a baby. It always goes back to the breeding fetish, doesn't it? Anyway, that's all I have to say. Bye-bye.